Listen up, boy. We are the first Iranian pro wrestling foundation in the history. Got it? Any situation about pro wrestling that you showed up their history as a fake history for Iranian pro wrestling?
Hey everyone, Bryan from WrestleMap here, and welcome to Tales from the Map. This is a new series idea I had that I'd like to try out that will be a little different from the usual spotlight that I put on wrestling scenes around the world, and instead focus on my experiences dealing with some of these wrestlers, promoters, and international figures that are a literal world apart from me, both physically and culturally. I'd like to tell these stories because, first of all, I think they're interesting, and they're a little bit of a closer look at the experiences I've encountered while trying to become the foremost authority on international pro wrestling. If possible, I'm going to tell these stories in a way that doesn't burn any bridges or upset any of the sources that I've worked so hard to build. So, when necessary, I might need to censor some names or promotions, or perhaps alter them to blur the line of reality just slightly. On this first episode of Tales from the Map, we're going to be traveling to the Persian nation of Iran for the story of how I got caught up in the middle of the Iranian wrestling war. It's a tale as old as time in the world of pro wrestling. The war between two rival promotions, WWF versus WCW, New Japan versus All Japan, WWE versus AEW. It's not a new concept to wrestling fans at all. But what may come as a surprise to some is that this concept even exists in a place that's far off the radar of most pro wrestling fans, the Persian Gulf country of Iran, particularly in the city of Rasht. Rasht is the home of both Iran Wrestling Group and Iran Pro Wrestling, two rival promotions who absolutely despise each other, and it's personal. IPW was born out of IWG, and as a result of some defection that I don't know the exact details of, and to be honest, have been a little too scared to ask about. But there is a lot of bad blood there. And when I say things have gotten personal between both sides, that's not an understatement. When I initially discovered that these promotions existed, I was ecstatic. Sharing with the rest of the world that there was pro wrestling in Iran was something that really excited me, and providing insight into different unknown wrestling scenes was one of the main driving factors behind starting WrestleMap and constructing the Pro Wrestling World Map in the first place. I also thought that wrestling in Iran made for a great story. As an American who honestly doesn't know much about Iran or the culture of the country, I had always been led by the government and media to believe that Iran and its people absolutely despise America. But here is a very American thing like pro wrestling being practiced in the country. But one thing that I've always tried to do with this project, especially when dealing with folks from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds, is to leave politics and beliefs behind and just focus on the wrestling. It would be very short-sighted to expect everyone on Earth to have the same beliefs as me and refuse to cover those who lean a different way politically or religiously. I was happy to share what I had found about pro wrestling in Iran to the WrestleMap social media and website. With the share came some replies, and soon I had learned that not only was Rasht the home of IWG, but IPW was based there too. Was Iran secretly a pro wrestling hotbed that I was just recently uncovering? Well, while the country didn't turn out to be a hotbed for pro wrestling, the fans and wrestlers associated with the two companies certainly took their loyalty, their craft, and their accomplishments seriously. I would begin to receive messages from supporters of either side, knocking their rival groups. Inquiries I made into things such as live events began to get strange, yet interesting responses. On the lack of live wrestling events in the area, I was told that they were illegal. Now, I'm certainly not an Iranian legal scholar, and this very much could be true, but it appeared that one side was able to hold live events, and the other wasn't. So something wasn't adding up. There was certainly some jealousy and deep hatred involved when one side would get coverage instead of the other. Insults were sent my way about the other promotion, and I even started getting some insults of my own directed toward me. But things started to get even weirder. The allegations coming from each side about the other started to get more and more extreme. One was supposedly a supporter of Ayatollah Khomeini. The other supposedly didn't support women's rights in Iran. One was accused of being an arm of the Iranian military. And the other was accused of being and supporting terrorists. Now, there was no way to prove or disprove any of this, and for all I knew, it could all be true. It seemed far-fetched for all of this to be wrapped up into pro wrestling, but again, there was no way I could be 100% sure either way. My intention was to share pro wrestling from an unlikely part of the world, and now I'm caught in the middle of a war with potentially dangerous actors. What had I gotten myself into? While I was concerned about these allegations and any possible truth that they might hold, my concerns nearly doubled after opening Instagram one day. There, in my inbox, I had this threatening sounding message.
Listen up, boy. We are the first Iranian Pro Wrestling Foundation in the history. Got it? I could possibly put something together if here is some coming up. Is there any situation about pro wrestling that you showed up their history as a fake history for Iranian pro wrestling? So I would have a discussion or debate with you about this history making and the fake history making tonight live on Instagram. Give me 5.
I had touched on it before, but as an American who only really knows what the government and media has shared about the Iranian sentiment toward Americans, I had just received a pretty threatening sounding message from someone that I didn't know, from a country full of people who, from what I have heard, hate me. Whether what I've been led to believe up to this point is true or not, with the reputation Iran has been given by the West, just the thought of being threatened by an Iranian sounds pretty scary, and I would be willing to bet it's not something that many others in the wrestling media have experienced. The way things currently stand in the Iranian wrestling scene are pretty much the same as when I first encountered it. There's still immense bad blood between IWG and IPW. For my part, I've assured both sides that my only interest is sharing Iranian pro wrestling with the rest of the world, and that I'm looking to share and cover both equally and fairly. Now, that's calmed some of the back and forth down, and I'm not so much in the middle of the war anymore, or at least for the time being. We'll see if that changes anytime soon, as one of the promotions there is preparing to make some history in the not-so-distant future. But for now, this has been Tales from the Map. and the story of how I got caught in the middle of the Iranian wrestling war.